Today on the show, we're talking dinosaur poop. We're talking about dino end times, when that asteroid hit the Earth, and secrets of dino toenails. Did they have them? Were they like ours? No, we'll find out.
Pedicurosaurus.
This is Won't You Be My Gamer? I'm Elise Willems.
I'm Nicole Zavalich, and this is the show where two best friends are joined by an expert to learn. But we're not using textbooks.
No.
We're using video games.
Video games. What game are we playing today, Nicole?
Today we are playing Jurassic World 2 Evolution.
And we are joined by Dr. Nate Smith, who is the director of the Dinosaur Institute at the Natural History Museum here in Los Angeles. Thanks for coming on the show, Dr. Nate.
Thanks for having me out.
Do you have any experience playing dinosaur video games?
I do not. My video gaming experience kind of tapped out with the Nintendo Entertainment System, so this is all going to be new to me.
Throwback.
Okay.
Cool.
Cool. So Nicole's building, I guess her own Jurassic Park.
This game plays
Essentially.
basically like a Zoo Tycoon game. And
Which means nothing to you.
which means nothing to you, but
I
everything
can
to
gather
me.
it.
Yeah.
Well, don't skimp on the restrooms. Visitors always comment on those, so
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
where you can get some high survey
Yes.
results.
All
No,
right.
okay, it's a great note.
I'm going to ask something crass here, Dr. Nate. Since you said restroom and dinosaur poop, do we know, was it big?
Yeah, some dinosaur poop would have been quite big. We know that from coprolites, which is basically fossilized feces that we find
Oh, okay.
in the fossil record. Occasionally you can tell what that dinosaur might have eaten from.
Because
from those
everybody
guys.
asks about the bones, but they never ask about the fossilized feces, I feel like.
You know, if you get out in the paleo world enough, you're going to see, some coprolite happens T-shirts crop up and things like that. So it's a bit of an in-joke.
I want a Copperlight Happens t-shirt. Do you learn a lot from the feces?
You can. There are definitely paleontologists that have, studied dinosaur feces and coprolites and do analyses of them and things like that. Like any kind of trace fossil, there's only so much information you can get out of it. But we have an imperfect fossil record, so we'll take whatever data we can get.
Oh, okay.
So we don't condone shooting dinosaurs, but I am going to trank this dinosaur
Why?
because he's in the wilderness of Arizona. I don't know if we can consider Arizona to have wilderness, but he's there, and we don't want him there.
Now, are you on U.S. Forest Service land, BLM land? Do you have your permits for this?
Let's go with yeah. I'm so permitted. I'm permitted.
He looks tired.
Yeah.
He's been tranked.
Why do you think it's important for us to study dinosaurs? They're extinct. They're probably not coming back. Why? What is the value there?
All right, well, here's my push up the glasses nerdy part of they're not extinct, right? Because we do have birds, right, which are dinosaurs, right? So we're,
Hell yeah.
over 10,000 living species, so we're still in the age of dinosaurs.
Birds.
There you go, bird folks. But no, you're talking about a group of animals that was around for, and still is, for hundreds of millions of years and dominated the landscape and their ecosystems. They also kind of lived during a time of, huge environmental and geographic change, right? Dinosaurs got their start when the continents were still congealed in Pangaea, and by the end of the Mesozoic, continents were spread apart. So if we want to understand kind of how life has changed in concert with changing plates and geography, dinosaurs are a great system to study. They're a great system to study to understand, paleoecology and how life has adapted to changing environment and climate as well. All of those things that can be useful for, our current understanding of the Earth and its biota.
How much did continental drift affect the dinosaurs?
We think quite a bit because you can trace patterns of dinosaur groups and relationships from that very beginning back in the Triassic when you would have kind of the same flavor of dinosaur distributed across the globe. But then as the continents start splitting apart, it's a little messy, but you do start kind of recording, different groups in different regions that are kind of radiating. The analog would be thinking about mammal evolution and how often Australia, right, we got our totally different flavors of mammals than other parts of the world.
Okay, so what?
My team thought I should.
Were you driving through the lake?
So I
This
said.
is the Jeep biome.
Yeah, the
Okay.
Jeep
We're
biome
currently
here,
in,
and I told the Jeep guys to check out my dinosaur, and they just went right into the lake. So a lot to learn still.
Why is that dinosaur in the lake?
Well, he went in there because he wanted a little bath.
So it sounds like you need some of those Wisconsin Dells ducks,
Yes, yes.
Do we know, did dinosaurs bathe themselves in that way? Was that something they
Was
did?
hygiene a concern?
I'm not sure if dinosaurs would have kind of scrubbed up and taken a bath like we traditionally do. I mean, it's possible that some of these groups, particularly the ones on the line to birds that would have had feathers, might have done little dust baths. We know that modern birds will sometimes do that to help kind of kill off feather mites.
Because a lot of dinosaur science is like, it's some conjecture probably from what you have to go on.
Well, don't make it sound like we're just making things up.
A pseudoscience. But like,
We're not phrenology.
because I think it's really interesting when you look at the bones of a dinosaur that the actual flesh part, you're just kind of,
Well,
Yeah, well-
imagination.
yeah.
Educated guesses.
There you go. It's a little bit of scientific inference, right? So yeah,
Okay.
we don't have the fossilized muscle or kind of a lot of those tissues, but often a lot of those things leave telltale signs and marks, whether it's kind of muscle scars on well-preserved bones or little knobs and protuberances that things would have attached to, and so that can be enough to kind of constrain what the kind of musculature, the rest of the soft tissue anatomy might have looked like.
We think of there being this comet, this cataclysmic event that killed off the dinosaurs. Did other things kill off the dinosaurs?
Yeah, this is one of the things we talk about a lot. So most paleontologists kind of agree that the asteroid was kind of the icing on the cake, in a really bad day, and then followed by some really bad decades.
The nail in the coffin.
But there was many other things probably contributing to that extinction. So if we look at kind of the end of the Mesozoic, the end of the Cretaceous, you also have this transition from a hothouse world to an icehouse world, right? You also have major sea level regression, or kind of drops in sea level. We essentially had a seaway across North America that goes away, and most of life is concentrated in those kind of nearshore environments. So anytime you drop sea levels, we tend to see extinctions follow in the rock record.
Do you feel like Ross from Friends hurt or helped paleontology?
I've given this spiel a number of times. And yeah, it was, for a while that was popular, that was, I'd get introduced to people, oh, like Ross from Friends. Oh, like Ross from Friends.
I really hate when people take my sandwiches.
It went away, and then it came back once that got onto Netflix.
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, I'm old enough to remember, back in the day, paleontology used to be confused with Indiana Jones and Raiders, even though technically he's an archaeologist, but it's kind of like the trade-off of, who do you want to be compared to? This sexy, cool adventurer with a fedora, or like a whiny New Yorker?
Pivot.
What is that smoke?
So these are the flares that I put so that my helicopters know where to drop my tranked dinosaurs. The logistics make a ton of sense. Look how happy they look.
Are there other parks? Are they getting confused by other places to be dropping dinosaurs?
They shouldn't. So great question. But I want to be as clear as possible with my team.
You're not hiring the best, you're saying.
No.
You're on a budget for this.
No, I
park.
definitely have a budget, and I've already blew through like $500,000 or something.
Yeah, forget the permits. Some of these pilots might not even have their license, right?
I have so much money that people aren't going to ask questions.
Do you think the premise of Jurassic Park, like we've isolated the mosquito and amber, do you think that's ever a thing we're cloning?
So I'll start with the buzzkill part, which is that, we're not going to get Jurassic Park, because DNA as a molecule, it breaks down, it has a half-life, and that half-life does not give us the option of going back hundreds of millions of years and collecting that DNA, sequencing it, and then cloning dinosaurs. Now, Pleistocene Park, maybe, right? We can get ancient DNA from much more recently extinct animals, and there's a number of researchers and teams that are going into that.
What would some of those animals be?
Some well-known ones that people are working on right now would be things like the dodo bird, woolly mammoths, the Tasmanian tiger, the thylacine.
Yeah. Because that one was relatively, he was alive not too long ago.
Yeah, I want to say the last one was early 1900s.
There's technically footage of a living one.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's also a question of, are we truly kind of cloning one of these extinct animals, or are we kind of modifying the DNA and kind of inserting things that we've sequenced from these extinct animals into kind of current living analogs or close relatives or things like that? So there's kind of a gray area that we have here.
Yeah, whether you're bringing it back in the purest sense.
Again, kind of getting back to the Jurassic World theme here, is that there's almost certainly going to be some unintended consequences of those introductions.
Like creating the animal that it's too cool.
Yeah. Like a dodo bird.
Yeah. I do have a thing for flightless birds. Like, they're like my favorite.
None of the operational paleo centers that I've been a part of have had helicopter pads.
Quite so many helicopter pads.
I feel like federal funding for paleontology is much better in this game.
Yeah.
Or like evil scientist funding. Maybe.
Yeah, definitely don't worry about where my money came from.
I feel like the helipads are more so like, we need to get out of here fast.
Yeah.
Stuff's hit the fan.
And we need to trank our dinosaurs, basically. But look, we have guests or like scientists.
Oh, yeah.
Look at them. Look
They
how
don't
happy
know
are.
what they're getting in for.
A lot of khaki in that group.
A lot of khaki. I would argue too much.
Is there there's some jewel dinosaur out there that you think, man, I wish we could get this to come to be at the museum?
Ooh, well,
What are the dream exhibits?
I mean, to be perfectly honest, I got to say, I think we just opened one, in November, which is our new Common Center and our new Natalie, our long-necked sauropod dinosaur, which is this gorgeous kind of 80-foot-long dinosaur skeleton that has this incredible kind of like emerald green hue from the distinct mineralogy that's in it.
Okay, and that's Natalie with a G.
Natalie with a G,
Right?
yeah.
Why is that?
Good Natalie.
Good Natalie. A fun side story, yeah, this fossil and, well, multiple fossils that were collected over the past 15 years from a bone bed in Utah where when our crews were going out there in the early part of the summer, it was right after kind of the rainy season, and you would get all these gnats and little kind of no-see-um biters, and so the crew would come back looking like they had just been covered in chicken pox from getting eaten alive at this quarry.
So they were spiteful.
Yeah, everybody there paid for that name. Yeah.
Was that Nicole Ranger pose?
Yeah, I'm just assigning some rangers so that they can regularly be checking
You're
on my.
sending these people to their death.
Yeah, but this is an herbivore, so like I'm sending them to like.
But they're docents. I'm sure these are volunteers, right? They probably signed a waiver to your zoo.
We're gonna get a new dinosaur, you guys.
Stegosaurus.
Stegosaurus. So that's actually my favorite dinosaur. It has a lot to do with Spike from Land Before Time, and then I'm in love with every character named Spike. See, Buffy. And I love them. They seem slow and big and like cuddly in like a plate way.
Our fun little trivia about Stegosaurus is that it's kind of a little nerdy thing, but those spikes on the tail, we often have kind of all kinds of Latinized fancy names for different structures and parts of animals, but paleontologists call that little spiked end of the tail just the thagomizer from the Gary Larson Far Side cartoon.
Oh, okay.
That's funny.
Playing favorites here, I think.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
no
Nicole, come
question.
on, this is that one. Don't want to say taxpayer money. This is evil villain money.
And I'm gonna spend it in an evil villain way by playing favorites.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah, my baby.
Now, is that border set so your zoo can't grow larger after this?
Yeah,
I
so
mean,
this like white parameter here is kind of the
Okay.
end of our.
So we're gonna have like two.
Yeah, you're gonna have
dinosaurs.
one stegosaur in 3/4 of the zoo.
We've made our choice.
It better be pretty charismatic.
Oh, you'll see. They dance. They don't dance. Could you get dinosaurs to dance?
Certainly, yeah. The ones that had intelligence on par with modern birds.
Do we think that they did? Do we like gray parrot status?
Oh, I don't know about that.
Okay. Okay.
But certainly, better than we've kind of historically given them credit for, I'd say.
I feel like the Stegosaurus especially gets a bad rap because growing up, people would be like, "Oh, they're so dumb that they have a second brain in their tail."
I don't think you're going to be training a Stegosaurus to kind of polywana cracker.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I do think it got a bad rap.
We're delivering Steggies. Oh, look at them
Go,
coming
bring 'em in.
Now make sure they land right side up.
That's
You don't want them
important.
stuck in the ground.
What's that? What's going through that Stegosaurus's head while it is floating through the air?
Yeah. We provide them with the best drugs. This is a unconscious Steggy.
It's like, where am I?
Yeah.
Are we still in Arizona? What is that? A Triceratops? I hate those guys.
I hate those guys.
Keep me isolated. He goes, keep me isolated.
Hold me back. Hold me back.
Yeah. Is
There
that
he
water? Good.
There he is. Look at that little guy. Oh.
Tiny head for such a big body.
How do you feel about that sound it just made? Accurate?
Ooh, dino sounds. I mean, this is another place where I generally have to be a buzzkill.
Okay.
Right.
Someone's got it.
But we recreated that sound of that screaming mummy. Can we not do dinosaurs?
Well, they probably did make sounds, certainly, but a lot of them were probably kind of low guttural noises, similar to kind of modern crocodilians. these dinosaurs would have lacked the syrinx that a lot of modern birds have that enable that broad diversity of calls.
So did dinosaurs like a Stegosaurus have a way of communicating with each other?
I would imagine that they would, and they probably used, various parts of their anatomy or behaviors, movements, along with, those vocalizations. But those vocalizations were probably just not the roars that we hear in the movies.
Have you heard a cassowary make a sound? Because there's one at the LA Zoo. Bring it back up again. And it makes a noise that, to me, is a dinosaur. That's a dinosaur
Horrific.
noise.
So there are some groups of birds, and I hope I get this right. I think it's not the Old World, but the New World vultures that have independently lost that syrinx. And so you can look up in, say, the Macaulay Library at Cornell that has kind of audio files of bird sounds and get these calls. And yeah, you'll see some of these vulture sounds are very, very different from, the screeching eagle or, a nice little songbird.
So features like the feet, like what do dinosaurs have? Do they have claws?
Yeah, we would have called those unguals as kind of the nerdy term for those. But most of these groups would have had, a terminal kind of bony claw that then was probably, a lot of them would have had kind of a bit of keratin on the outside of it.
And then keratins are like fingernails?
Yeah.
And so how similar to fingernails?
Well, they wouldn't be true fingernails, but some of the material that makes them up would have been similar.
So a good
You
chew.
see keratin on a lot of these structures, yeah.
All right, well,
They're already fighting, huh?
Yep.
We think.
or
Maybe they're courting.
dancing.
Yeah, I mean, they don't seem that happy, Nicole. I have to level with you.
Well, I'm not done making their lives perfect, which I will do. But I think that I'm just really proud that I got them all together.
You got him here.
I got them here.
Step one.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nate, for joining us. We'd love to have you back. In the meantime, where can people go find out more about the Natural History Museum and your work?
Yeah, so you can go to nhm.org to learn more about our museum, or stop by our main campus or the tar pits. At our main NHM campus, you can see the new NHM Commons and our new dinosaur Natalie, but also each of these dinosaurs that you've been dropping into your zoo is on display.
Heck yeah.
Cool. Well, go check that out, and also go to pbssocal.org/gamer, where you can support the show and help us make more episodes. What did you put in there, Nicole? What's that? $10,000 for what is that?
Spare no expense.
Oh, gosh, I knew it was coming.
Just like you shouldn't when
knew it
you
was
donate to PBS SoCal.
You're such a clever girl.